no cost of living crisis at the state-funded BBC. Shock new figures reveal that Gary Lineker is still top of the big earners leaderboard, raking in over £1.3 million a year for introducing clips of football, whilst BBC lifer Zoe Ball pulls in just shy of 1 million big ones a year to play records on the radio whilst she sips a Starbucks cappuccino. Other coffee brands are available. And most shockingly, it's been revealed today that ex-BBC News presenter Huw Edwards, who was suspended in July 2023 over allegations in the Sun newspaper of paying a young person for sexually explicit photos, well, he managed to increase his salary to almost £500,000, even though he wasn't on air. Paid a fortune not to work. Welcome to the BBC. Meanwhile, Greg James, Stephen Nolan and Lauren Laverne and a bunch of other people you've never heard of between them will pocket well over £1.2 million this year alone. Now, would they get that on the open market, in commercial radio or on commercial TV? Do me a favour. Why does Auntie pay over the odds for its talent? There is no business or indeed moral case for these crazy wages. Not when your poor old granny is threatened with jail for not forking out 160 quid a year on the licence fee. In fact, it takes over 8,000 grannies just to cover Saint Gary Lineker's wages, a man who has shown utter contempt for the BBC's impartiality rules with his pronouncements on the environment, the government's Rwanda scheme, and most shockingly, his remarks about the war in Gaza.
Constant images of children losing their lives day in, day out. Now, obviously, we all know what, October 7th happened and, the Hamas thing, but
the worst single attack on Jews since the Holocaust, the Hamas thing. And whilst the invoices from Gary Lineker's agent keep on coming, BBC viewers are leaving in their droves. The corporation's in-house newsletter, The Guardian, report that 500,000 households cancelled their licence fee last year alone. Is it any wonder, given a perceived political bias, unfunny woke comedies and right-on finger-wagging storylines on shows like Doctor Who and EastEnders? Now, I like the BBC. It's a great British asset and I want it to stay. But the output has got to represent the whole of the country, not just Islington in North London. And with an annual income of over £5 billion, it's got to start living within its means. The BBC is overpaying its pointless celebrities and is fast becoming the weakest link. Let's get reaction now from my top panel tonight. Columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku. We've also got political commentator and former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and author and best-selling broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Great to see all three of you this evening. Where do we start? Charlie, is the BBC still worth the money?
It is, because like you, I'm
You had to think about that, didn't you?
Well, because as someone that supported the BBC, like you, I am a fan of the BBC, but I want the BBC to go back to its fundamental principles of informing, educating and entertaining. Now, in order to entertain, you're going to have to spend a significant amount of money on good talent. Gary Lineker is a fantastic football pundit. We've had a fantastic set of Euros where he rightly was criticised for being too critical of Gareth Southgate, by the way, but that's by the by. But he is a brilliant football pundit. He should stay in that lane. It is a failure of the BBC not to make sure they give him the proper contract, which makes sure so he's not...
That he can't actually be so political.
Exactly. The impartiality of the BBC is absolutely integral to its principles and its brilliance. But if you break that, then that's when the system totally collapses. So the BBC need to sort out its contracts. Of course, people will be asking about Huw Edwards, how you can't work for a year and have a pay increase. So even though I am a fan of the BBC, when you hear stories like this, it does erode your trust. Your heart does sink a bit. But if the BBC can get its act together, I think it should stay, and I think it should continue to inform, educate and entertain.
Well, Esther, what do you think?
I agree with that. I think there's some people that you'll never convince convince them about the value of the BBC, because they're forced to pay for it. So far as people are forced to pay for it, there will always be that small group of people in society that are just, no matter what it does, it's just not acceptable because they don't want to live with having to pay the license fee. I also think it's unfortunate that the BBC is in an era of Netflix and Amazon Prime and Paramount where, you can pay £10 a month and basically get so much choice in terms of content. But I do think you're right. It has to return to its core principles. There are some things that I think are necessary for the BBC. I think it's a shame that they've closed a lot of sort of local radio stations where young people use those avenues as a way to get into media.
Yeah.
I thought that's a real shame. I would actually be happy to pay for them to bring that back.
BBC local radio was also great for the community as well.
Well, exactly. I would happily see them cut things like Strictly and all the rubbish that I don't need to watch, and all these series with the one-eyed transgender Muslim or whatever diverse cast.
That's right. And also a bunch of middle-aged detectives mumbling.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know about you, I can't actually hear what they're saying on the BBC now.
Well, apparently that's dignified speaking. But I don't need any of that. I would just, if they could just keep it to the bare minimum of what we would expect of them and foster young talent.
$5 billion a year, of which $3 billion is licence fee income. Would you slash that?
No, well, I would.
Do they need $5 billion?
I think we need. No, they don't need $5 billion. I think we need a reduction.
Well, we do GBNews on about 80p.
I think it should be.
And our audience is growing.
I think it should be somewhat uniform with what we pay for like Netflix, and they have to keep up with what the streamers are making.
Well, the BBC has brought itself into disrepute, hasn't it? Paying Gary Lineker over £1 million to play football clips. Gary Lineker's audience actually dropped when he was on air during Match of the Day. When he was suspended, the figures went up, Amy Nicole.
No, I did think you were going to bring that one up, and I was thinking it myself, but then Charlie mentioned the Euros, and the Euros were streamed on BBC and ITV, weren't they? And BBC won by quite a long stretch.
The BBC always wins, and it's not because of Gary Lineker.
Is it not, though?
I don't think so.
No advert.
Well, Match of the Day ratings went up when he was absent, when he was suspended.
But then whenever Gary Lineker's not there, and they have pundits like Alex Scott, people moan about that as well, and I do think Esther's got a point that we need to nurture talent and then bring back local radio. And also what's happened to Newsnight has been really, really rubbish. And I was thinking in my head, well, maybe if they paid these people slightly less, there'd been more funding for that. No, but it doesn't work. Because if you pay someone less, they come up in the ranks, they're lauded as an amazing broadcaster, what's going to happen? They're going to get poached.
Well,
like Susanna Reid did.
Find somebody else.
So it's just never going to work.
Let me tell you, it happens to Tottenham every season. Huw Edwards paid £500,000 to sit at home baking banana bread.
That's misleading. We looked into that.
We know for a fact that he's been paid and he's not been on telly. That smacks of bad BBC management.
No, he was paid for overtime.
But they don't care.
Overtime.
Amy Nicole, they don't care because it's not their money, it's ours.
I think the thing is,
One moment, let Amy make her point.
No, I think Esther's going to make the same point.
Well, you can have that in any.
You guys weren't brought here to agree with each other.
I know, but I do.
That's not the formula.
This is a rare day. I think there's something a bit undignified about having these people's salaries plastered there. It's like, oh, this person doesn't earn that much, this person doesn't earn that much. We can do that literally at ITV, Channel 5, Channel 4. We can do that at any station. That's not what I have a problem with. Is the BBC doing what it was fundamentally created to do? And they're legitimate questions.
I have a big problem with the money they're spending. £950,000, a Radio 2 breakfast show host, to play a few records and say, it's nice and sunny outside, have a good day.
You've presented radio for a long time. You know there's a lot more to it.
There is, but it's not 900 grand's worth of public money, Charlie.
But I guess that's a competitive market.
Of course not. If those fools are willing to pay me, I'll say, of course, they couldn't prize me out of this gold-plated GB News contract that I'm on. But the whole point is that this is the private sector. This is GB News. So I'm paid to have an opinion. My salary, all salaries are a private matter because it's a private company. Okay. This is public money we're talking about here. This is grannies who, by law, are forced to pay the licence fee, Charlie. Briefly, if you can.
Well, these are also people who are very talented. And if they do leave the BBC...
Why do you keep saying they're so talented?
Well, they are talented.
What's involved in playing a few football clips?
Because they will attract... Well, because there are lots of people that are interested in football.
Do you think people watch Match of the Day for Gary Lineker?
No. I also think half the population should be lobotomised.
I certainly think they watched Match of the Day for Gary Lineker for his
Channel 5
football commentary, certainly not his views on a political commentary.
So he is a good football commentator.
Yes, I didn't say he wasn't.
Yeah.
But,
no, I don't know. I've got no skin in this game.
But the reality is, it is a fundamental failure of the BBC. For example, of Huw Edwards, OK, the salaries are published. There should be absolutely no way he should have had an increase in his salary.
But he worked more.
But that is... He hasn't worked for an entire year.
But
and he's had
but-
an-
in the year off.
No, hang on a minute, because over the coronation...
One at a time. I'll come to you in a moment.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you that the failure of the BBC to
Well,
get
keep it
their
up.
contracts
Okay.
in proper order, so you don't see these increases in pay where somebody
Okay,
hasn't worked
briefly,
for years.
Amy, my concern for the BBC, because I want it to exist. I think the licence fee is completely unjustified now and it's got to go. And I think it will go because people are already not paying the licence fee. I think it was last year 500,000 people stopped paying it. 3 million last few years have actually stopped paying it. So in the end, it's going to disappear anyway. My worry about the BB, Amy Nicole, is it's going to be like the NHS, something we're all forced to pay for, but which only some of us use.
Possibly, but
At which point it's game over.
When you look at comparable countries with licence fees, they look at ours with envy and say that's great value. They get so much more than we do.
Well, then they can pay it.
Do they watch Doctor Who with envy?
It's good to have a big, sparse, broad offering, which is what the BBC does so well. And when you look at other places with state broadcasters, they don't do it as well. We do state broadcasting very well.
OK, well, listen, speaking earlier today, the BBC's Director General Tim Davie said no one wants to waste £1, but we need to act proportionately and fairly, and I think that's what we did. Prior to any breaking of the Huw Edwards story, people do get pay rises for extended responsibility and more hours of work, so that's fairly normal, and that is what resulted in the change.